The VLGA is very proud to launch FastTrack 2025 to be held at the RACV Club on Friday, the 2nd of May. Our premier leadership conference, this FastTrack will focus on leading with integrity, exploring ways councils lead responsibly, ensure good governance in decision-making, and effectively represent the interests of their communities. We'll be joined by Local Government Minister Nick Stakos, the Lord Mayor of Melbourne City, Nicholas Rees, and comedian Anthony Lehman, or Lemo as we know him from the hit series Utopia, as well as some amazing panellists who will all share their knowledge and experience. Our first panel of the day looks at the relationship between the councillor group and the CEO. This important relationship is crucial to good governance and a highly functioning council. The panel will dive into all aspects of the CEO employment relationship, discussing everything from recruitment to performance management and succession planning. Joining us on the day will be Noelene Duff, former head administrator at the City of Casey, Jim Magee, former councillor and mayor of Glen Eira City Council, and former CEO of South Gippsland Shire and executive director at the Victorian Ombudsman, Kerryn Ellis.
I think one of the most challenging elements is maintaining that relationship and keeping that on a positive foot, because generally CEOs and executive teams are pretty busy people, but where you might have a mayor that perhaps needs more support than another mayor you've worked with, it's important to ensure that engagement is strong and positive. So my tip is you need to be light-footed and you need to be responsive, but you also need to set boundaries and limits in terms of your time. But yeah, the focus must be on maintaining the positivity of that working relationship.
Look, I think the challenge is looking at the CEO. The CEO's got to manage a $200 million budget if it's a city council. Within that, the CEO's got to work a way around cost shifting from other levels of government, the rate cap that is imposed on all of councils, the aspirations of the councillor group, the occupational health and safety of the organisation, and of course the enterprise bargaining that goes on from time to time. It's a very integrated approach that the CEO has to bring all of that together. The councillor group only have to decide whether they support those ideas or not, and that's the gist of it. The CEO's got a much bigger role than that, but ultimately the CEO of any organisation, and I think local government especially, because I look at CEOs throughout local government, every one of them are top achievers. They are the top of their field, and again I'll go back to when the CEO is achieving well, the councillors are achieving well, and the organisation is achieving well. But with cost shifting and all the different pressures on councils, and with inflation, we've just come through a major pandemic, which has really knocked a lot of councils around. I just think, everyone should just get on board, work together, and really try and just give the community what the councillor started on council for, to make their city a better place.
I think the most challenging part is that both roles are really, really critical to successful democracy and to successful outcomes for the community and the organisation, but they're really quite different roles and they have different responsibilities. So I think the most important thing to making that work is a genuine empathy and interest in understanding the perspectives of the other. And in an ideal world, a real interest and investment in supporting each other to be successful in the different roles. Ultimately, you're aiming for the same outcome and hopefully you've got aligned values, but the jobs are different jobs, and the more that can be understood and empathised with, I think the better in terms of outcomes for the community.
The relationship, you have to work both sides with the relationship. So the CEO needs to invest, and in the case of a council, the mayor in particular needs to invest in that relationship. And there needs to be a level of openness and honesty and direct communication, because they are two key roles. And if those two people don't function effectively and work effectively together, that impacts on the whole organisation.
Oh, look, great question. I was blessed to have Andrew Newton as my first CEO. Andrew Newton was a very, very high achieving CEO, probably one of the top 50 CEOs in the country, both in the private sector or in the local government sector. And I learned an awful lot from him. And then Rebecca McKenzie came in. Now, Rebecca's a totally different person, but equally as her expertise is excellent. Her knowledge about local government, the way she interacts with councillors, her knowledge was fantastic. She came in and did a lot of changes. And I'll be quite honest, I don't like change. I was never great at accepting change. But all the changes that Rebecca has made over the years is actually, the council's a much better place. It was a great place before she comes. I think it's even better because it's modernised.
Yeah, okay.
It's modernised it with her ideas and taken it, because Andrew was there for, like, I think 16 years.
Yeah, a long time.
A long time. And then Rebecca comes in with fresh ideas. She changed things around. Our council meetings then started to be, live streamed. There's more interaction with the community. It's been a wonderful transition from one to the other. But ultimately, both CEOs had the respect of the councillor group. And I really believe that is the key.
Yeah, it's an interesting question, because I think the CEO's role has become more professional, but there's also a lot more formal and statutory responsibility that sits with the CEO role. And councils have become much more complex in terms of regulation, but also in terms of the depth and breadth of roles that councils play in the community. So CEOs, I think, are increasingly managing very complex businesses. I think managing employees has become more complex, and we all know the challenges that came in terms of workforce management with COVID and all of those kinds of things. Many opportunities and many positive developments, but it is complex to manage. So I think that one of the challenges in the relationship between the mayor and the CEO is that sometimes the mayor may have had no experience at all in managing a large and complex organisation. And that's not necessarily a problem. Mayors and all councillors get elected for very different reasons, and it's certainly not necessary that they've had corporate experience. But I think one of the ingredients that has become much more important in that relationship is a willingness on behalf of a mayor or a councillor to really try and understand the depth and breadth of what the CEO is attempting to manage and what their responsibilities are, and also to understand that while the council in one sense is the CEO's most important stakeholder, they're not the only part of the job. And that doesn't mean that the councillor should not feel as though they're important and they're valued, but it's also, I think, important for the councillor to understand that sometimes it's actually in the best interest of the council as a whole and the community for the CEO to address other matters as a priority. And I think when that understanding is developed, the relationship can be incredibly, successful and mutually supportive.
Well, I suppose if it's fairly seamless, if there's, a high level of communication, there's good understanding of what that communication is about, what purpose it serves, that it's in the context of good governance and good decision making for the council and for the organisation. I think, that's pretty important, to be clear about what the respective roles and responsibilities are of the CEO and of the mayor, and the joining points, the grey areas where they overlap as well. If that can be openly discussed and talked about with those people involved in that relationship, then that's a really good starting point.
Oh, it's got to be communication. It's got to be the CEO after every assembly, and every council has assemblies every week. The last 10 minutes of that assembly, when the officers have all left, have CEO councillor only time. And that's where it's, you just talk about your wants, your needs, your fears, and just put it out there. The CEO can look at those and say, well, I'm really happy to help you with that. It's not a council issue, but we know other levels of government that can deal with that. But it's that communication. That is the answer, and that is the key to a successful council. And once that penny drops in the councillors and they understand that. And that's invaluable. Rebecca McKenzie brought that into Glen Eira Council. And that's probably been the most valuable 10 minutes of any council week, is that 10 minutes CEO council only time where you get to speak open and frankly, and the CEO can respond without fear or favour.
The key ingredients for me, and certainly what I found worked best for me as a CEO, is build strong and authentic relationships early. If things go off the rails early, it can be quite difficult to get it back on track. So investing the time early in getting to know each other, understanding each other's strengths, understanding the councillors or the mayor's, intent for their term on council. From my perspective, trust, authenticity and openness on both sides are absolutely critical, and being able to have those honest, confidential conversations that won't go any further. I mentioned before having empathy for each other's roles, and I know from my perspective, having councillors that sought to actually understand the depth and breadth of what the CEO role does was really helpful, because I spent every Wednesday with the councillor group, but the rest of my week was effectively a 7-day-a-week job running a very large and complex business. And councillors that are keen to understand that complexity, I think, are really great supporters for CEOs. And the other thing that I would ask of councillors is just to remember that the CEO is actually a human being, and treating people and thinking of people with compassion and empathy in the way that you would like to be treated always goes a long way.
Registrations for FastTrack are now open on the VLGA website. I look forward to seeing you there.